welcome back to a special consignment update this week. We're going over a collection of guitars that many of you will already know about, the Granary collection. So this is more of an antique and classical guitar special. So there'll be lots of you who are interested in this, but maybe some people who are interested in more traditional guitars. You may have some interest from an academic level, but it might not be for you. But anyway, the Granary Guitars is a fantastic collection of instruments, all collated by a gentleman called Alan Morgan, who has consigned them for sale with us. It's a collection of guitars that he's been, for the past few decades, has been building up after he first took delivery of a Romanolos guitar. It sort of really piqued his interest in concert guitars, and it kind of snowballed from there. And he thought the best way to kind of indulge his interest would be to source out guitars by some of the great makers and see firsthand what they were really like. So many of these have been sourced over the years by Alan from some very, very good reputable dealers and various auctions as well. So there really are some lovely guitars that we will see in this video today. The full catalogue is online. If you go to gardnerholgate.co.uk or guitarauctions.com, you can see the catalogue, the antique and classical guitar sale, which is being sold on the Friday, the 6th of December. You'll also find the rest of the catalogue, got just under 1,900 lots in the sale. So go over to that website, have a look at what we've got. Now, a lot of the guitars in Alan's collection are actually included with sound clips on the CD, The Sound of Spain. This was a CD made by Alan, guitars played by David Rubio, who's a very well accomplished player and a great luthier as well, and maker of guitars. So this Sound of Spain CD, and as you can see with the track listings, all of these guitars in the collection will feature on here. Now, we don't have all of these guitars, I should say, a caveat to that, but there are many which are featured on the CD. So I will put a link in the description of this video just to the SoundCloud samples we have online of the guitars that are in this cell. So like I said, not all of them we have sound clips for, but certainly the ones that are on the CD that are in the auction. So please do go have a look at those. It gives you a good idea of what they sound like. I won't be playing them today. I'm not a classical guitar player. I'm sad to have to report, mainly an electric player with a plectrum, but obviously we do sell many antique and classical guitars, so this will be more of an overview of the guitars, their condition, what they look like, and really what we have in the cell, so you can almost, for those of you who can't view, can see them in the flesh. So there, I think that's enough of me waffling on. I'm sure you want to actually look at the guitars. Once again, Friday the 6th of December 2024, we will be selling the Granary collection and other antique and classical guitars. I will show you a few other guitars after the Granary collection that fall into the same category. But I hope you enjoy this video. As always, make your comments below. Give us any suggestions for future video content, and of course tell us what you liked most of all. And if you do like this video, remember to subscribe at the end. We'll let you make your mind up later. So we're starting with an antique guitar in this coffin case. I think a lot of these antique guitars, we're very used to seeing them in these style cases. Now, before I continue, I'm just going to put a caveat with names of makers. Now, my pronunciation can be bad at times, so I may say some of these names wrong, so please do forgive me, but I'll try and get most of them right. So here we go. We have the first one, an antique and classical guitar from the Mirecourt region. It's a region of instrument making in France from the 19th century, this guitar, and a maker called Derazey. Now, the Derazey family were more so known for violin making, but guitars are known. Certainly less guitars have come onto the market than violins. We sold many violins by the family, and as you can see, it is a fine quality instrument. think our cameraman's just giving an overview. You can see there's a few cracks in the back there, fairly typical over the years. It's a very old instrument, so I mean, I think we see restorations on some vintage guitars, don't we, that are only 40, 45, 30, 50 years old, whereas, you know, this is, well, it's over 100 years old, and more so. So decent quality instrument. It's obviously had some work, but a lovely example from the maker. So once again, in this ebonized case, we have another very fine antique guitar, and this is a significant birthday year for this guitar. It was made in 1824, so this guitar is 200 years old. Maker is Gennaro Fabricatore, a very important Italian maker. Many of the maker's guitars do appear in museums around the world, so very, very well regarded. You can see it's in the typical Italian style, where you have the fingerboard, which is sort of flush with the table and the head. So you can see it's not resting over, completely flush and built in. And you have these frets, tapering frets running onto the table. So as always, we've got this fine spruce top. We've got some nice carved decoration to the table, and we got the maker's label on the inside as well. I'm not sure if we can pick that out. But apart from a few modifications on the head with some tuning pegs, it's in fine condition. Doesn't appear to be any cracks of note. Doesn't appear to have had any sort of major restorations, to be honest. It is a good example. So, Italian maker from Naples. Not the only thing that Naples is important for, as CJ knows too well, being a big pizza connoisseur. Yeah, a very fine guitar by the maker, and now 200 years old. Amazing. So again, another antique guitar. The collection does start with all the antique guitars. And this is another Mirecourt guitar. So again, another 19th century guitar from an important region of France for violin and guitar making. Stunning guitar, really, isn't it? All the inlay around the side, this pearl inlay within the mastics around. But this one's branded Petit Laine, and what does that translate to English, did we say? Small woolly trousers, apparently. Jeans, yeah. But anyway, that's by the by. That is the maker's name. You can see there is some rippling and some repaired cracks to the bird's eye maple back. And bird's eye maple, I believe, is it's a disease in wood that ends up making this very, well, quite pretty grain and texturing. So always often used in guitar making. A lot of Fender guitar necks, for example, use that type of wood. Nice figuring. So there we go. We've got the open headstock with the engraved brass tuners. We got the ivory tuner buttons. This is exempt from the Ivory Trades Act, as it is an antique musical instrument. So anything less than 20% ivory can be sold with an exemption certificate, which we do have. And then you can see around here, like I said, all of this lovely inlay. Quite a stunning thing. There's a couple of repaired cracks to the top, to the spruce top, but otherwise a fine guitar and a playable guitar, and that is the all-important thing. So here we have an interesting guitar, maker called Jose Linares, 19th century again. You'll notice the more interesting head, so it would have, well, it is, or would have been a double course guitar, so much like a contemporary 12 string, it would have had 6 lots of 2 strings. There's been sort of various adaptations you can see to the bridge here, so it is currently set up to hold 6 strings, but you can see where other bridges would have sat. But it is a guitar that probably does need some work going on. It has had some work over the past, lots of repaired cracks to the back, but still a very interesting guitar indeed. So we have another very pretty antique guitar, again from the Mirecourt region, very much in terms of spec and head and body size, very much like Lacote guitars, which is Lacote is a very well regarded French maker. But this one we have not been able to attribute. I'm sure someone might be able to, possibly. But you can see the fine engraved brass tuners there. So very fine guitar indeed. And you can see this engraving as well on the top. There are some cracks, as a lot of these guitars have, repaired cracks. But what I do find quite fascinating about this guitar is there seems to be an inscription. I think the name is Derazey. And what we think is that this is probably the name of the engraver. So because it was such fine work, they made sure their name was put on the, or should I say the person who inlaid and engraved the guitar, so put their name to it rather than the maker itself. As you can see there, some very nice grained Brazilian rosewood back and sides, exempt from any CITES restrictions for selling domestically, as it does predate the 1947 convention dates, but it will of course need certification if it's to be exported. So those of you who are tuning in for internationally and interested, yes, we can ship it to you, but the paperwork must be in place. So again, another fine instrument. And another antique guitar for you, from around 1850, this one. So over 150 years old and English. So maker Roudhloff, another well-regarded maker. I think if I was questioned, name a few English antique guitar makers, I think the one that would instantly fall to mind is Panormo, but then Roudhloff would probably come a close second for me, as certainly the guitars that we've offered in the past. We have had a few by the maker in the past. Brazilian rosewood back and sides. I mean, I'm not sure whether we can pick out the grain on that, but it is a stunning piece of wood. Has had some restorations, some wood infill, some repaired cracks. But Brazilian rosewood can dry out and go quite brittle. And you see the top as well. There are some repaired cracks. But otherwise, it's another fine instrument, and it is still a playable instrument. So another nice guitar. And here again we have another Mirecourt instrument. Again, the famous or popular region in France for instrument making, violins and guitars, as I said earlier. And I think for those of you who have been watching from the start, you will very much see the characteristics of these instruments with this sort of mustachio bridge and the type of purfling and the woods used. So this has some very fine grained maple, very fine indeed, nice and tightly grained. And then again, we've got some fine grained spruce on the top. Has had some refinishing work over the years, and ebonized board. And then we've got the friction peg box, which can sometimes be frustrating for tuning instruments, but if you bear with it, it does work. And there we go, another fine Mirecourt instrument. So here we have, it's just a really interesting instrument. So it's an Italian Battente, sort of the style of guitar, antique, hundreds of years old. It does need a lot of work, but it's just an interesting instrument. And really, it would have been an important instrument if it was all in one piece and it still had a label. We could have established the maker, but unfortunately, what we have is what we've got. But it will still be desirable to collectors to restore. What you tend to find is these are incredibly lightweight guitars. I remember we had one in very fine condition that was just featherweight, and it was almost unbelievable. So really fine woods, really thin. Not veneer-like, but I suppose not far from. But an interesting guitar that does need restoration, and it is a few hundred years old. So in this coffin case, you can see we're getting to more, I guess, more classical guitar specs now. Although we've got the small-bodied size, the more traditional methods, I guess, are starting to come through. So this is a maker called Antonio de Lorca, who was based in Malaga in Spain. And this is the first guitar that you hear on the Sound of Spain CD. So if you go to track 1, go to the link in the description and you'll find the SoundCloud, our company SoundCloud, where you'll find this instrument being played by David Rubio. So you can hear it in action, but it's obviously had some restoration over the years. It's had some bridge modifications. You often find these little plates, sort of plates where the table gets worn down just to protect. So that'll be sort of some kind of rosewood or ebony. But there we go. It's got the maker's label inside as well, 1839. So getting closer and closer to being a 200-year-old guitar. So there we go, slightly deeper body, fitting more in with traditional classical guitars, and another fine instrument, although it has been through the middle a little bit. So in here, possibly one of the most important English guitar makers of this type, and those of you who are interested in these guitars will instantly recognise this as a Louis Panormo. Very fine guitars indeed. And Louis Panormo was the son of an Italian luthier, born in Paris, and then moved to London and set up shop in Bloomsbury. So this particular guitar is from 1840, I believe. Yes, it is 1840. And it has had some work. You can see from the table there are some repaired cracks, but we do have this very nice Brazilian rosewood back and sides. We always have these ivory discs, a characteristic of Panormo guitars. There we go. You can see the Brazilian rosewood is just stunning, to be honest with you. Continue on to the sides as well. It's a really, really lovely instrument, and all these things that you see on the guitar are very, very. They are defined characteristics of the maker. So we do have another guitar that's in the Panormo style. Don't necessarily think it is by Panormo, but in the Panormo style, which we'll show you later, and you'll see how similar it is to this guitar, including the inlay around the sound hole, the type of bridge, and then one big feature or characteristic is the way the head is slotted into the neck. You see even Martin guitars sort of adopted this method and sort of use it to this day. But there we go, the open head, and usually always has Baker tuning strips, which this does. And you can see there's some tuning buttons have been replaced. But Panormo, along with a maker called Joseph Paguez, we actually sold one of a Paguez guitar earlier this year. Very, very very important in the history and evolvement of guitar making, because essentially what they did is they came up with this strutting style of having these fan struts that allowed for higher tension and thinner woods to be used, and this strutting would obviously support all that tension. And it's sort of within the development of guitar that was quite important. So it's why Panormo is regarded a very well-regarded maker. So this is Louis Panormo. There were other makers within the Panormo family, but this is, I guess, this is as desirable as it gets, from 1840, and it is a fine instrument and a privilege to offer. So here we have a guitar from Spain. Before I continue, I will just mention the Panormo guitar that we have just seen. That is track 2 on the Sound of Spain CD. And this guitar is on track 3. So this is a maker called Altamira, from 1879, this guitar. And it's an interesting guitar in the fact that we've got this sort of small-bodied instruments, are very much like the old parlour guitars, but we've got these sort of Torres-style features coming in, like the shape of the head and the bridge plate. There we go. So based in Barcelona, and yeah, another great instrument. So again, Brazilian rosewood back and sides, and with the spruce top. And yeah, I think it's another good, interesting guitar that shows sort of some decent characteristics. Now there is a guitar by this maker, a more ornate example that is in the V&A Museum. There are some people that have heard and played both, and they actually say that this one sounds better, maybe because it's more stripped down and plain, but still a very fine instrument by the maker. So here we have a interesting guitar, very much, we think it's most likely Valencian. It's got this Valencian style with all the inlay. There are very similar guitars like Salvador Ibanez, who make very similar guitars in this style. This one's actually labelled Zarega, and he was actually a performer and a teacher based in London, originally from America, and came over and settled in London. So that is what the label alludes to, but it was almost certainly made in Valencia, so a Spanish guitar, and it's interesting. Yeah, nice thing. So this guitar appears on track 5 of the Sound of Spain CD, and the maker is Manuel Ramirez. This guitar dates from 1908. Manuel Ramirez was actually a very, very important maker, and almost essential with the evolvement of guitars. He very much, I guess, widened the acceptance of the Torres methods of guitar making, and he even went on to teach great makers such as Santos Hernadez and Domingo Esteso, who are regarded as making, well, some of the finest classical instruments ever. So yeah, this is as you will see, it's a small scale, short scale guitar. So scaled down, I guess it's more like a 3/4 size, but it's very, very sweet sounding, as you'll hear from the CD. It's had some restoration. It came to Alan in a pretty bad way, and he had Pete Barton restore it for him, a very well respected luthier. And there we go. Very interesting guitar, smaller guitar from the maker, but like I said, an essential maker in the history of guitar making. So in this very fine and interesting case, I do love this case actually, with the sort of silver knobs on there. But this is a very this is quite an important guitar actually. I'll carefully release it. There we go. So Enrique Garcia, Barcelona. There we go. We'll just have an overview of it. You can see the very tight Brazilian rosewood back and sides. You see there is a split there, but there we go. Very fine instrument indeed. Now Enrique Garcia was the first pupil of Jose Ramirez I, and he went on and set up his own shop in Barcelona, and almost became the father of guitar making in Spain. Domingo Prat considered Garcia to be the Stradivarius of the guitar, and to be a very similar standard to Torres. So there we go. We can see very fine instrument indeed, and you'll see in here the Tornavoz inside the sound hole is still there. It is still intact and is in place. And quite importantly as well, another thing to mention is his first pupil was Francisco Simplicio, another important maker, and you will see there on the head with the carving there, very, very familiar looking with Simplicio's work as well. So another fine instrument, and that can also be heard on the Sound of Spain CD. So here's a rather sweet little instrument. A maker called Gomez Ramirez, and I will read an interesting excerpt about the maker shortly. But this is a small body guitar of inscription, and stating that it was made for a Celestino Arlotti. And interestingly, we have a photograph where you can see from the time the guitar was presented to her. So fantastic piece of provenance that comes with the guitar. And I think what is really nice about this guitar, although it's a small body guitar, no expense has been spared. It's basically just a scaled down version of his sort of full size finer instruments. Now we have two instruments by this maker, and before I continue, I will show you the next one. And in here we have a slightly larger but still short scale instrument, and we do wonder whether this was the upgrade instrument for the player. So we're not too sure of the history, but I am going to read an excerpt as we look at this instrument about the maker. So Julian Gomez Ramirez, born in Spain and may have been a pupil of Jose Ramirez I, no relation however, moved to France at the end of the 19th century and set up a shop in Paris. He worked in primitive conditions that shocked visitors, having no electricity and worked by the light of a kerosene lamp. And then in an English guidebook published in 1922, it stated that Ramirez almost makes his guitars out of the street. His workshop was about 10 feet square with a door 6 feet wide. The workshop of Ramirez was not what we had expected. One is, I think, justified in expecting a neatness, a delicacy about the place where fine musical instruments are made. Had Ramirez been a maker of chairs or even cartwheels, his workshop, though small, would have been appropriate. But that from this rough place could come out the most difficult of musical instruments to make, disturbed one's sense of suitability. I think that is a fantastic excerpt from that now antique guidebook. So just a little insight to the maker's work, but a well-regarded maker, and two lovely small-bodied instruments. Very interesting indeed. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a Simplicio guitar in the cell, and I showed you an Enrique Garcia guitar, who was, well, Simplicio's teacher. Now, so this is from 1929, and Simplicio actually states quite proudly that he is a pupil of Enrique Garcia, right in the centre of the label there. So obviously very, very proud to be a pupil of his teacher, and a very fine guitar indeed. I think the one characteristic you do see on Simplicio guitars is this type of head, the carved head, very much in the Garcia style, but a fantastic instrument and highly desirable in the classical guitar world. So as with most of the important guitars in this collection, the last guitar we saw, the Simplicio, does also feature on the Sound of Spain CD, as does this guitar. So this is a Herman Hauser guitar made in 1931. Now Herman Hauser, I think you can probably tell from the name, from Germany, and was the first, he's credited as being the first non-Spanish luthier to make guitars in the Spanish style. And really, he kind of he introduced the Spanish style of making to Europe, or sort of further afield internationally. So a very, very important and crucial maker in the, I guess, the exposure of this kind of guitar. Segovia, the great player, he had a guitar made by Herman Hauser, and he actually went on to state that the guitar he had made was essentially one of the greatest guitars of its type. So a very well regarded maker, and you can see this one is a Brazilian rosewood example, Brazilian rosewood back and sides, and we have a Bavarian spruce top. No limit of the amount of Bavarian pine you can get out in the region. And there you can see the classic Herman Hauser label. We've sold a few Hauser guitars over the years, and they always have this type of label, but a very fine guitar indeed by arguably one of Germany's finest makers. So in here, another surprise, surprise, important maker, again on the Sound of Spain CD, Santos Hernandez, who was a pupil and one-time foreman of the Manuel Ramirez workshop, which is obviously legendary in the history of Spanish guitar development. It was actually Santos Hernandez who constructed the instrument bearing a 1912 Manuel Ramirez label that Segovia concertized on and recorded in the 1920s through to the 1950s. So I guess really Hernandez built the guitar that shaped the public's conception of a great guitar sound. So really is an important maker. Santos is also considered a maker who divined the true art of flamenco guitar, and the importance of Santos Hernandez on the historical development of the guitar is therefore rather immense. So again, really privileged to have this, I guess, flamenco type guitar with the Spanish cypress back and sides, spruce top. We've got the golpeador plate as well, which you often see on these as the protection plate from more of the, I guess, the more percussive type of playing that flamenco guitar demands. But a fantastic instrument, and I think it goes without saying we've had lots of interest in this guitar already. Another very nice guitar indeed. I guess one of the most celebrated Pupils of Manuel Ramirez, along with Santos Hernadez, was Domingo Esteso, or Esteso should I say, from 1934. Very fine flamenco instrument indeed. This one has had some restorations, as you can see. There's a repaired crack to the back there, for example, but again, a very well regarded maker, and really nice to see. And this guitar, of course, does feature on the Sound of Spain CD. So this time from 1938, we have a guitar by Antonio Emilio Pascual Vuidez, studied in the workshop of Manuel Ramirez, as a lot of the great makers did. And you can see the Brazilian rosa back and sides and the spruce top. This one has a label that features Buenos Aires in Argentina. The maker did go between Spain and Argentina, hence the label. And you can see the very fine carving on the head. So he obviously thought a lot about this instrument in particular, going to the extra levels with the castle carving. Another fine instrument. So we saw the Domingo Esteso guitar earlier, and this is from the workshop of. So after the maker's passing, the widow decided to keep the workshop going, and the nephews, who were pupils of their uncle, were the luthiers in charge of keeping the name alive. So known as the Conde brothers, another name well known within Spanish guitar making. They would have made this guitar under their uncle's workshop label. There we go. So this one is from 1956. We've got the rosewood back and sides and the spruce top in the labelled original case. Lovely instrument. So here we have a guitar from the 60s, from 1967, a maker called Manuel Contreras, another pupil from the Jose Ramirez workshops, and this one with the rosewood back and sides and the spruce top. There is actually a repaired crack to the top that was done by the maker himself, Contreras, but another instrument, I guess more on the affordable scale of guitars from this collection. So again, still a very fine classical guitar indeed. One of the, I guess, best regarded English makers of classical guitars, due to the association with Julian Bream using one of his guitars that he made when he resided in New York. So this is a David Rubio guitar from 1969. David Rubio actually, well, he initially was planning to have a career in medicine, but got fascinated by the whole guitar and guitar making thing, that he sort of changed lanes and started making some very fine guitars indeed. So in the early 60s he was in New York, but then he sort of settled in the UK later on, and this is one of the guitars that he would have made in his English workshop. So highly regarded maker, and these are always very popular. So here we have from 1976 a guitar by Daniel Friedrich, who is a very important maker from France, resided in Paris, and was influenced by fellow Parisian Robert Boucher, who was in turn inspired by Julian Gomez Ramirez. Now, Frederick was very much involved with universities and doing scientific experiments to the acoustic properties of things like guitars and instruments, and sort of very much used his findings in the making of guitars themselves. This is a very fine instrument indeed, and can be heard on the CD. Fantastic instrument, and it's sure to be one of the most popular lots in the sale. Here we have another fine English maker, Martin Fleeson from 1979. There we go, we've got this really straight-grained rosewood, nice graining on it, and the spruce top. But fantastic instrument, ebony board, and one of England's finest makers. So in this rather nice homemade appearance, but finely made case, we have this Greg Smallman. Now, John Williams, I guess, is the player that increased the popularity of these instruments. They're always very heavy. As you can see, we've got this fine back and sides, Coco Bolo back and sides, Looks very much like Brazilian rosewood, but is not. Similar characteristics. Now, it's got this spruce top, which is very, very fine indeed. And he has this sort of interesting lattice bracing and carbon fibre, which allows him to make his tops incredibly thin, like ridiculously thin. And you really can tell by tapping on it, which sort of gives the guitars a lot of good projection. So really interesting instrument. And yeah, this one's from 1996. So we featured all the Granary guitars we're going to show today. So I think you'll all agree, some very exceptional classical guitars there. We're just going to have a quick look at some other guitars that we got in the sale that are worth a mention. We're not going to go into too much detail, but just to show some of my picks. So I guess no classical guitar section would be complete without Jose Ramirez. So this is from 1994, and this is a Class 1A model, so one of the highest models. And this is designated the C650 traditional, so it's made using the traditional Ramirez methods, but a fine instrument, and this one's actually being sold for charity. Yeah, have a look in the description, the footnote, and you will see that it is being sold on behalf of a good charitable cause. So another Jose Ramirez guitar, this one slightly older, 1968, and again Class 1A model, and as you will see, this is a Flamenco guitar, Cypress back and sides, and then we've got the top with the Golpador. So another fine instrument from the Jose Ramirez family. So in the Granary collection we saw a Domingo Esteso factory instrument, of course the workshop that was carried on by the widow and the Conde brothers, the nephews. So this is another instrument by the nephews, 1963. So very similar to the previous instrument. There we go, so worth a mention, desirable guitars, collectible, and yeah, from 1963 this example. So in this rather old tooled case. I mentioned earlier when I showed you the Panormo guitar, the characteristics, and this is an interesting instrument. We're not saying it's by Panormo at all, but you can see the similarities to the maker's work with the bridge and the sound hole rosette, and even the way the head's grafted. Not quite as fine as a lot of Panormo guitars we see, but still an interesting antique small-bodied guitar in the Panormo style. Yeah, just really, really interesting. So there we go, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed this video today, something a bit different for you, and hopefully it will please the classical guitar fans, and I hope we'll find many more out there. But as usual, if you like the video, subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and of course hit the bell icon, and then you'll be notified of all future video uploads. We'll probably do another couple before the sale, but the sale is between the 3rd and 6th of December. We've got public viewing on the 29th of November, which is a Friday, and the following Monday, which is the 2nd of December. So come on down and have a look at these instruments if you wish. We can, of course, do condition reports for you as well. Please do bear with us on condition reports. We will get them all seen to, but we do have a deluge of them and a backlog of about 200 at the moment. So yeah, do bear with us. You will get replied to. So as always, make your comments, tell us what you liked, tell us what you don't like, any corrections. I'm sure there will be some errors in there along the way, as I'm trying to pull these seeds of information out of my brain as we go. But really, thanks for joining us today. Have a look at the website, auctions.gardenholgate.co.uk and guitarauctions.com for the full catalogue. And we really look forward to seeing you at the sale, and we will see you for the next update video.